I never thought my own brother would try to destroy the relationship I'd spent years rebuilding with our mother, but that's exactly what Richard was doing. At 64, I thought I was past the point of sibling rivalry, but apparently, some people never grow up. When Mom started giving me suspicious looks every time I picked up her coffee mug or admired a family photo, I knew something was terribly wrong. It all started 3 weeks ago when I went for my usual Sunday visit to Mom's house. I'd been making these weekly trips for 2 years now, ever since Dad passed away, and we all realized how isolated she'd become. Mom seemed different that day, clutching her purse tighter when I walked into the living room and quickly moving some jewelry boxes when she thought I wasn't looking. When I complimented her new lamp, she actually flinched. Before I reveal what really happened, please hit that subscribe button and like. I love hearing from viewers. What's your city? My name is Margaret Cooper. I'm 64 years old, and I've been dealing with what I can only describe as a calculated campaign to poison my mother against me. The person behind this is my younger brother, Richard Cooper, who's 58 and has always been Mom's favorite. Richard works in sales and has that smooth-talking charm that can convince anyone of anything, which is exactly the problem. He's been living in the same town as Mom for 15 years while I moved away after college, and apparently, he's decided that makes him the rightful heir to everything. My saving grace in all this has been my daughter, Sarah Cooper, who's 35 and moved back to help care for her grandmother after her own divorce last year. Sarah has been staying in Mom's guest room 3 days a week and has witnessed some of Richard's manipulative conversations firsthand. She's the one who first warned me that something wasn't right. Then there's my longtime friend, Janet Morrison, who I met at church 20 years ago and who has become like a sister to me. Janet knows our family dynamics better than anyone, and she's been helping me figure out how to handle this mess without making things worse. She's also the one who convinced me that I needed to document what was happening before it destroyed my relationship with Mom completely. The first real sign of trouble came when Mom asked me why I'd been casing the joint during my visits. Those were her exact words, and they hit me like a physical blow. I'd been admiring her antique collection the previous week, the same pieces I'd grown up with, asking about their history because I genuinely wanted to preserve those family stories. Apparently, Richard had twisted my innocent questions into evidence that I was planning some kind of heist. When I tried to explain myself, Mom just looked at me with this mixture of sadness and suspicion that broke my heart. She told me that Richard had been looking out for her and helping her understand warning signs of elder abuse. The irony was devastating because Richard was the one manipulating her, not me. He'd somehow convinced her that my weekly visits, my offers to help with groceries, even my suggestions about home safety improvements, were all part of some elaborate scheme to take advantage of her. Sarah was furious when I told her what had happened. She'd noticed that Richard always seemed to show up right after my visits, spending long periods talking quietly with Mom in the kitchen. She'd assumed they were just catching up, but now we realized he was probably debriefing every conversation, twisting every interaction to fit his narrative about my supposedly predatory behavior. The situation got worse during my next visit when Mom actually asked me to empty my purse before I left. The humiliation was crushing, but I did it because I needed her to see that I'd never taken anything. Even then, she seemed disappointed, as if she'd expected to find evidence of my guilt. That's when I realized how deep Richard's poison had spread. Janet suggested that I start keeping a journal of every interaction, every phone call, every visit with Mom. She pointed out that Richard was essentially gaslighting both Mom and me, creating false narratives that were becoming reality in Mom's mind. As someone who'd worked in social services before retirement, Janet recognized the manipulation tactics immediately. The breaking point came when Mom called me at home, her voice shaking as she accused me of taking Dad's watch during my last visit. She said Richard had noticed it was missing from her jewelry box and had reminded her that I'd been asking questions about Dad's belongings. The truth was, I had asked about the watch, but only because I wanted to make sure it was properly insured. I'd never even touched the jewelry box. I tried to stay calm as I explained that I'd never taken anything from her house, that I was only trying to help preserve Dad's memory and keep her safe. But Mom's voice got colder as she told me that Richard had predicted I'd deny everything. He'd apparently spent weeks building up this narrative, preparing her for every possible response I might give. Sarah was at Mom's house when this call happened, and she later told me that she'd found Dad's watch in Richard's coat pocket that same evening. When she confronted him about it, he claimed he'd taken it to get it repaired as a surprise for Mom. But Sarah knew that was impossible, because Dad had just had it serviced before he died, and it was working perfectly. That night, I sat in my kitchen feeling like my world was falling apart. I'd spent 2 years slowly rebuilding my relationship with Mom, dealing with my own guilt about living so far away during Dad's illness and trying to make up for lost time. Now, my own brother was systematically destroying all that progress for reasons I couldn't even understand. Janet came over that evening and found me crying over old photo albums, looking at pictures of Richard and me as children. She sat with me for hours, helping me understand that this wasn't really about stolen objects or even inheritance. This was about control and attention, about Richard's need to be the only important child in Mom's life. But what I discovered next changed everything. The next morning, I decided I needed concrete evidence before I could confront anyone. I called Sarah and asked if she'd meet me for coffee to talk about what she'd witnessed. She agreed immediately, and I could hear the frustration in her voice. "I've been waiting for you to call," Sarah said when we met at the little cafe downtown. "I couldn't sleep last night thinking about that watch in Richard's pocket. And it's not just that incident. I've been paying more attention lately, and there's a pattern." She pulled out a small notebook from her purse, and I realized she'd been keeping track of things too, just like Janet had suggested. "Remember when Mom accused you of taking her good china serving bowl? I found it in Richard's car 3 days later. He said he'd borrowed it for a potluck at work, but when I asked him about the potluck later, he couldn't remember any details." My stomach dropped. "Why didn't you tell me then?" "Because I wanted to believe him. He's my brother too, and the alternative seemed impossible." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "But then there was the silver picture frame, and Mom's pearl earrings, and that first edition book of Dad's poems. Every single time Mom noticed something missing after your visits, I'd find the item somewhere in Richard's possession days or weeks later." I felt like I was going to be sick. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 8 months that I can prove, but I think it started right after Dad's funeral, when you began visiting more regularly." Sarah reached across the table and grabbed my hand. "He's been deliberately taking things after your visits and then suggesting to Mom that she should check if they're missing. He plants the idea in her head, and then when she discovers they're gone, he reminds her that you were just there." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Richard wasn't just stealing objects, he was stealing my relationship with our mother. Every visit I made, every attempt to be a good daughter, was being twisted into evidence against me. "But why would he put the items back eventually?" I asked. "Because he doesn't actually want them. He just wants Mom to lose trust in you. Once the damage is done, he returns everything and plays the hero." "Remember how he found Mom's wedding ring in the couch cushions last month? And how grateful she was?" I did remember. Mom had been so relieved and had praised Richard for being so thorough in his search. She'd mentioned how lucky she was to have such a devoted son looking out for her. When I got home, Janet was waiting on my porch with a thermos of coffee and a determined expression. "You look terrible. What did Sarah say?" I told her everything, watching Janet's face grow darker with each revelation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, staring out at my neighbor's garden. "This is more serious than I thought," Janet finally said. "He's not just manipulating your mother's perception of you. He's training her to distrust her own memory and judgment. Each time she notices something missing and then finds it later, she's learning to doubt herself. What am I supposed to do with this information? If I tell Mom what Sarah discovered, Richard will just deny it and probably convince her that Sarah and I are conspiring against him." Janet nodded grimly. "He's created a perfect trap. Any evidence you present looks like you're trying to shift blame. Any witness you bring forward looks like they're helping you cover up." We sat in silence for a while, both of us grappling with the magnitude of Richard's deception. I kept thinking about all the phone calls from Mom over the past months, her voice getting colder and more distant each time. All those conversations where I'd tried to defend myself, not knowing that Richard had already poisoned the well. "There has to be a way to expose this," I said finally. "Sarah has been documenting everything. She's seen him with the missing items." "The problem is timing," Janet said. "We need to catch him in the act, in a way that your mother can see for herself. Words won't be enough at this point." That evening, Sarah called with an idea that was both brilliant and terrifying. "I've been thinking about this all day. What if we set up a situation where Mom can witness Richard's manipulation directly?" "What do you mean?" "I mean we create an opportunity for him to follow his usual pattern, but this time, Mom sees what really happens. It's risky, but I think it's the only way to break through the web of lies he's built." As Sarah explained her plan, I felt a mixture of hope and dread. If it worked, I might finally get my relationship with Mom back. But if it backfired, I could lose her forever. And there was something else that worried me even more. What we were about to discover would reveal just how far Richard was willing to go to maintain his control, and the lengths he'd already gone to that we hadn't even realized yet. Sarah's plan was elegant in its simplicity, but it required perfect timing and nerves of steel. We would need to orchestrate a situation where Mom could witness Richard's deception firsthand without him realizing he was being observed. "Here's what I'm thinking," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of careful consideration. "Next Sunday is Mom's book club meeting. She always leaves her reading glasses behind and comes back within an hour to get them. What if we arrange for something specific to go missing during that window?" I gripped the phone tighter, my palms already sweating at the thought. "You mean use ourselves as bait?" "Exactly. I'll mention to Mom that you're planning to visit Sunday afternoon to help with her garden. Richard will overhear, like he always does. Then when Mom leaves for her meeting, he'll expect you to show up." The weight of what we were contemplating settled over me like a heavy blanket. What if he doesn't take the bait? What if he's suspicious? He won't be. His pattern has been working perfectly for months. He has no reason to think we figured anything out. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, watching shadows from the streetlight dance across the familiar cracks in the plaster. The house felt too quiet, too empty, filled only with the sound of my own breathing and the occasional creak of settling wood. I kept imagining all the ways our plan could go wrong, all the additional damage Richard could inflict if we miscalculated. By morning, dark circles ringed my eyes, and my coffee tasted like ash. Janet found me sitting on my back porch, still in my pajamas at 10 o'clock, staring blankly at my neglected vegetable garden. "You look like you haven't slept," she said, settling into the weathered wooden chair beside me without invitation. "Having second thoughts?" "Third and fourth thoughts," I admitted. "What if this makes everything worse? What if Mom thinks Sarah and I planned this whole thing to frame Richard? Janet was quiet for a moment, studying the tomato plants that had grown wild without proper attention. What's the alternative? Let him continue destroying your relationship with your mother? Let him keep manipulating her until she cuts you out completely? The questions hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I knew she was right, but knowledge didn't make the fear any less real. I keep thinking about how confused Mom sounded the last time we talked. How she questioned her own memory when she couldn't find her jewelry box. He's already done so much damage. Which is exactly why this needs to stop now, before he does more. Janet's voice carried a firmness that I wished I could borrow. She had always been better at decisive action, while I tended to overthink until opportunities passed me by. You know what scares me most? What if we discover he's done things we don't even know about yet? What if this goes deeper than missing trinkets and planted evidence? The possibility had been lurking at the edges of my consciousness for days, growing stronger each time I considered Richard's methodical approach to manipulation. Someone who could orchestrate such an elaborate deception over months wouldn't limit himself to small-scale schemes. Then we'll deal with that too, Janet said simply. But we can't help your mother if we don't know the full extent of what we're fighting. Sunday arrived gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that matched my churning stomach perfectly. Sarah called at noon, her voice tight with nervous energy. Mom just left for book club. She's wearing her blue cardigan and carrying the canvas bag, which means she definitely forgot her glasses. We have maybe an hour and 15 minutes. Are you sure about this? No, Sarah said honestly. But I'm sure about Richard, and I'm sure about what he's been doing to our family. That has to be enough. After we hung up, I sat in my car outside Mom's house for 10 full minutes, watching the rain streak down the windshield and obscuring my view of the front door. The neighborhood looked different somehow, as if the impending confrontation had shifted the very air around the familiar houses and sidewalks I'd known since childhood. Finally, I forced myself out of the car and up the front walkway, my heart hammering against my ribs with each step. The spare key was still hidden under the ceramic frog by the mailbox, just as it had been for 20 years. As I let myself in, the familiar smell of Mom's lavender air freshener mixed with the lingering aroma of her morning coffee hit me like a wave of nostalgia and grief for what our family used to be. The house felt different now, charged with secrets and suspicion in a way that made my skin crawl. Every family photo on the mantel seemed to mock me with memories of better times, and every piece of furniture held the potential for hidden deceptions I hadn't yet discovered. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, her face pale but determined. He's upstairs. I heard him moving around in Mom's bedroom about 5 minutes ago. We positioned ourselves in the living room where we could see the stairs, my pulse thundering so loudly I was certain Richard would hear it from the second floor. The waiting felt endless, each second stretching like taffy, while we strained to listen for footsteps above our heads. Then we heard it, the distinctive creak of the third step from the top, the one that had announced our midnight snack raids as teenagers. Richard was coming downstairs, and clutched in his hand was something that would change everything we thought we knew about his betrayal. What he was carrying wasn't just another trinket or piece of jewelry to hide and blame me for stealing. It was something that revealed the true scope of his manipulation. And as I recognized what I was seeing, I realized our family's problems were far more serious than any of us had imagined. In Richard's hand was Mom's jewelry box. Not just any jewelry box, but the small wooden one that held her most precious pieces. The one she kept locked in her bedroom dresser drawer. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the box itself. It was what I could see spilling out of it. Not jewelry, but folded papers, documents, and what looked like a small stack of cash. "Oh my God!" Sarah whispered beside me, her hand flying to cover her mouth. "He's been going through her financial papers." Richard descended the stairs with careful, practiced steps, clearly comfortable with this routine. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd done this many times before, heading straight for the kitchen without even glancing in our direction. Sarah and I exchanged a look of pure horror. This wasn't about missing earrings or family heirlooms. This was about money, documents, private papers. This was so much worse than we'd imagined. We crept toward the kitchen doorway, staying low and out of sight. Through the crack between the door and frame, I could see Richard sitting at Mom's small kitchen table, the jewelry box open in front of him. He'd pulled out what looked like bank statements, insurance papers, and several 20s from Mom's emergency cash stash. "She won't miss another 40, Richard muttered to himself, counting bills. "And she's already forgotten about updating the beneficiary forms anyway." My stomach dropped to my shoes. Beneficiary forms? He wasn't just stealing small amounts of cash. He was manipulating Mom's financial documents. And somehow, all of this was being blamed on me. Sarah grabbed my arm so tightly it hurt, her fingernails digging into my skin. Her face had gone completely white, and I could see the same sick realization dawning in her eyes that was currently making my head spin. Richard pulled out his phone and took pictures of several documents before carefully folding them and putting most of them back. But not all. Some papers went into his jacket pocket, along with the cash. "I need to tell her about Margaret's visit last week," he said quietly, still talking to himself as he worked. "Maybe mention seeing her near the bedroom. Plant the seed before she notices anything else missing." The calculated coldness in his voice made me want to vomit. This wasn't impulse or desperation. This was methodical, planned manipulation. And Mom was trusting him completely while growing more suspicious of me with each visit. Sarah tugged on my sleeve, motioning toward the back door. We needed to get out before he finished and caught us. But as we started to move, Richard's phone buzzed loudly in the quiet kitchen. "Hi, Mom," he answered cheerfully, his voice completely transformed from the calculating whisper we'd just heard. "Book club over already? Oh, you forgot your glasses again? No problem. I'm here at the house checking on things. Actually, I was hoping to talk to you about something when you get home." "It's about Margaret." Sarah's eyes went wide with panic. Mom was coming home early, and Richard was about to spin another lie about me, probably something about today's visit that hadn't even happened yet. "I'll wait for you," Richard continued into the phone. "Don't worry about rushing. I'll put some tea on." He hung up and immediately began putting everything back in the jewelry box with swift, practiced movements. Within 30 seconds, all evidence of his activity was gone, except for whatever documents and cash now bulged slightly in his jacket pocket. Sarah and I pressed ourselves against the kitchen wall, trapped between the back door and discovery. We could hear Richard moving around, filling the kettle, getting mugs ready, playing the part of the devoted son. "We have to get out of here," Sarah whispered so quietly I almost couldn't hear her. "But we also have to warn Mom before he talks to her." "How?" I whispered back. "If we leave now and call her, Richard will know we were here. If we stay, we're caught." "And if we do nothing," Sarah said, her voice tight with desperation, "he's going to convince her that you're the one stealing from her, and now we know he's stealing a lot more than trinkets." Through the doorway, we could see Richard checking his phone again, probably calculating how much time he had before Mom returned. What we didn't realize was that he was also checking something else, something that would make our situation infinitely more complicated and dangerous than we'd prepared for. Richard moved from the kitchen toward the living room, and we could hear him settling into what sounded like Mom's favorite armchair. Sarah grabbed my wrist, her fingers cold and trembling. "The back door," she whispered, barely breathing the words. "Now." We crept toward the exit, but the old house betrayed us. The floorboard near the door let out a sharp creak that seemed to echo through the entire kitchen. Richard's movements in the living room stopped completely. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sharp and alert. "Mom, is that you? I thought you were still at book club." Sarah and I froze against the wall. My heart hammered so loudly, I was certain he could hear it from the next room. We listened to his footsteps approaching the kitchen. "Must be the house settling," Richard muttered, but his voice carried a note of suspicion. We heard him walk to the kitchen doorway and pause there. Sarah squeezed my hand so tightly, her nails dug into my palm. Through the gap between the wall and the refrigerator, I could see Richard's shadow stretching across the kitchen floor as he stood in the doorway, scanning the room. "Weird," he said quietly, and I could hear him moving closer to where we were hidden. Could have sworn I heard something. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound was barely audible, but in the dead silence of our hiding spot, it might as well have been a fire alarm. Richard's footsteps stopped again. "What the hell?" Richard's voice was right next to us now. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. A text from Mom. "Running late at Dorothy's. Be home in 20 minutes. Love you." But it was too late. Richard appeared around the edge of the refrigerator, staring down at us with an expression that shifted rapidly from confusion to anger to something that looked almost like fear. "Margaret? Sarah? What are you doing hiding in Mom's kitchen?" His voice was carefully controlled, but I could see his jaw clenching. "How long have you been here?" Sarah stood up first, pulling me with her. "We came to check on your mom," she said, her voice steadier than I expected. "The front door was unlocked, so we let ourselves in." "And decided to crouch behind the refrigerator because why exactly?" Richard stepped back slightly, but his eyes never left our faces. He was calculating, trying to figure out what we might have seen or heard. "We heard someone moving around," I said, surprised at how calm I sounded. "We didn't know who was here. We were about to leave when you got that phone call from Mom." Richard's expression relaxed slightly, but his posture remained tense. "So you've been hiding here this whole time, while I was on the phone with her?" "We didn't want to interrupt," Sarah said smoothly. "Family conversation and all that." "Right." Richard's tone suggested he didn't believe a word of it. "And what exactly were you planning to check on?" Mom seemed fine when she left for book club. I could feel the stolen documents crackling slightly in his jacket pocket as he crossed his arms. The irony of him questioning our presence while he had just robbed Mom's jewelry box was almost overwhelming. "Just wanted to make sure she's eating properly," I said. "She's been looking thin lately." "Funny how concerned you've become recently," Richard said, his voice taking on that familiar edge I'd heard so many times in Mom's retelling of his warnings about me. "All these sudden visits and check-ins. Mom's mentioned how attentive you've been." Sarah stepped slightly in front of me. "Is there something wrong with Margaret caring about her mother?" "Of course not," Richard said, but his smile was cold. "It's just interesting timing, that's all. Mom's been noticing some things going missing lately. Small things, sentimental things. And then suddenly Margaret's here all the time, wanting to help, wanting to check on things." "What are you implying?" I asked, though I knew exactly what he was doing. Even caught red-handed in Mom's house with her belongings in his pocket, he was still trying to make me look like the thief. "I'm not implying anything," Richard said. "I'm just saying Mom's worried. She doesn't want to believe her own daughter would take advantage of her trust, but the evidence keeps piling up." "What evidence?" Sarah's voice was sharp now. Richard shrugged. Missing jewelry, cash from her purse. That silver picture frame from the mantel disappeared right after Margaret's last visit. Mom's heartbroken about it, but she's not stupid. The audacity of it took my breath away. He was standing there with Mom's things literally in his pocket, spinning lies about me stealing the exact items he had just taken. "You're unbelievable," I said quietly. "Am I?" Richard's eyes narrowed. Or am I just the only one willing to protect Mom from being taken advantage of by someone she loves too much to see clearly? Sarah looked like she wanted to slap him. "And I suppose you're going to tell her about finding us here today? Turn this into more evidence against Margaret?" "I don't have to turn it into anything," Richard said. "Two people hiding in my mother's kitchen while she's away, going through her things. The story tells itself." "We weren't going through anything," I protested. "No? Then you won't mind emptying your pockets? Your purse?" Richard's voice was smooth, confident. "Just to clear the air before Mom gets home?" I stared at him, realizing with growing horror that he had just perfectly trapped us. He had Mom's belongings hidden in his own jacket, and now he was challenging us to prove our innocence. If we refused, it would look suspicious. If we agreed, and he somehow planted something on us, or if he revealed what he'd stolen and claimed we'd taken it, we'd be finished. "That's rich coming from you," Sarah said coldly. "What's that supposed to mean?" Richard asked, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Maybe you should empty your pockets first," Sarah continued. "Set a good example." Richard's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket, then stopped. "I don't think I like what you're suggesting." "Then you understand how Margaret feels about your accusation." We stood there in tense silence, the three of us locked in a standoff that could explode in any direction. Through the window, I could see Mom's car pulling into the driveway. "She's home," I whispered. Richard smiled, and it was the most chilling expression I'd ever seen on his face. "Yes, she is, and I think she deserves to know exactly what I found when I got here today." The sound of Mom's car door slamming shut echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched Richard's satisfied expression. He had orchestrated this perfectly, cornering us just as Mom returned, ready to spin his web of lies while the evidence of his own theft sat hidden in his jacket pocket. "Well?" Richard prompted, his voice carrying that familiar tone of false concern. "Are we going to tell Mom the truth about what happened here today?" Sarah stepped closer to me, her presence steadying. "The truth sounds like an excellent idea." Through the front window, I could see Mom struggling with grocery bags, moving slowly up the front walkway. She looked tired, her shoulders curved with the weight of more than just her shopping. The sight of her, so trusting, so vulnerable to Richard's manipulation, made something fierce and protective rise in my chest. "She looks exhausted," I murmured, watching Mom pause to catch her breath. "All the more reason not to upset her with unpleasant discoveries," Richard said smoothly. "Unless, of course, you'd prefer I wait until she's rested to tell her about finding you two rifling through her things." "We weren't rifling through anything," Sarah snapped. "Margaret was sitting at the table when I arrived, and you know it." Richard shrugged. "That's not how it looked to me. Two people in an empty house, acting guilty the moment I walked in. Mom will draw her own conclusions." The front door opened, and Mom's voice carried through the house. "Hello? Anyone home? I thought I saw Sarah's car outside." "In here, Mom," I called back, my voice surprisingly steady. Richard's eyes glittered with anticipation. He shifted slightly, and I caught the faint outline of whatever he'd stolen pressing against his jacket pocket. The audacity of it made me dizzy. He was about to accuse me of theft while literally carrying the evidence of his own crimes. Mom appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face lighting up when she saw us. "What a lovely surprise! All three of you here." She set down her purse and a small grocery bag on the counter. "Though I wish you'd called ahead. I would have picked up more milk." "We were just having an interesting conversation," Richard said, moving to help her with the remaining bags she'd left by the door. "About trust and family." Something in his tone made Mom's smile falter slightly. "Oh? What kind of conversation?" Sarah and I exchanged glances. This was the moment. Richard was about to launch into his accusations, and once he started, stopping him would be nearly impossible. Mom already doubted me thanks to his previous manipulations. Catching us here would only confirm her worst fears. "Actually, Mom," I said quickly, "before Richard shares his thoughts, there's something important I need to tell you." Richard froze halfway to the door, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "Margaret, maybe we should let Mom get settled first." "No," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "This has gone on long enough." Mom looked between us, clearly sensing the tension crackling in the air. "What's going on? You're all acting very strange." "Someone's been stealing from you," I said, the words tumbling out before I could lose my nerve. "Small things at first, then bigger items. Richard's been taking your belongings and then convincing you that I'm the one stealing them." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face went completely blank, as if she couldn't process what I'd just said. Richard's expression shifted from shock to fury to something that looked almost like panic. "That's quite an accusation," he said carefully, "especially coming from someone who was just caught going through Mom's house while she was away." "We weren't going through anything," Sarah said firmly. "But you were. We saw you take something from the living room and put it in your jacket pocket." Richard's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket, then stopped. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Mom sank slowly into one of the kitchen chairs, her face pale. "Stop. All of you, just stop." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't understand what's happening here." Looking at her, so small and confused and hurt, I felt my resolve strengthen. Richard had been poisoning her mind for months, making her doubt her own daughter, her own judgment. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. "Mom," I said gently, kneeling beside her chair. "Remember when you couldn't find your pearl earrings? The ones Dad gave you for your anniversary? You were so upset, convinced you'd lost them somewhere." She nodded slowly. "Richard said, he suggested that maybe—" She trailed off, her eyes filling with understanding and pain. "He suggested I might have taken them," I finished. "Just like he's been suggesting about everything else that's gone missing. But Mom, I would never take anything from you." "Never." Richard stepped forward, his composure cracking. "This is ridiculous! You're turning Mom against me based on paranoid fantasies." "Then you won't mind showing us what's in your jacket pocket," Sarah said evenly. The challenge hung in the air like a sword. Richard's face had gone ashen, but his jaw was set with stubborn defiance. "I don't have to prove anything to you." Mom looked up at him, and I saw something shift in her expression. "Richard, what's in your pocket?" The way she asked, so quietly, with such terrible hope that we were wrong, broke my heart. But Richard's reaction told us everything. He stepped back, his hand protectively covering his jacket. "I can't believe you're all ganging up on me like this," he said. but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Nobody's ganging up on anyone," Mom said, standing slowly. "I'm just asking a simple question. If there's nothing there, just show us." Richard looked trapped, his eyes darting between the three of us. And in that moment of desperate calculation, I saw him make a choice that would change everything between us forever. Richard's shoulders sagged, and for a moment, he looked less like the confident manipulator he'd been and more like a cornered animal. He glanced toward the door, as if considering making a run for it, but Sarah had positioned herself between him and the exit. "Richard," Mom said again, her voice growing stronger. "Please." Something in her tone seemed to break through his defenses. His hand trembled slightly as he reached into his jacket pocket. When he pulled it out, a small velvet jewelry box sat in his palm. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "My earrings." The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of months of lies finally collapsing. Richard stared down at the box as if he couldn't quite believe it was there. "I was going to put them back," he said quietly. "When?" I asked, trying to keep the anger out of my voice for Mom's sake. "After you convinced her I was the thief? After you destroyed our relationship completely?" Richard's face crumpled. "I needed the money. I have debts, serious ones, and I thought she'd never notice if I just took a few small things. But then she started asking about them, and I panicked." Mom reached for the jewelry box with shaking hands. When she opened it, her pearl earrings caught the kitchen light, as beautiful as ever. "These were going to be yours someday," she whispered. "Both of yours. Everything I have was going to be yours." "I know," Richard said, and now there were tears in his voice. "I know, Mom. I got in over my head, and it seemed easier to blame Margaret than to admit what I'd done." The casual way he said it, as if destroying my relationship with our mother had been a simple matter of convenience, sent a fresh wave of hurt through me. "Easier," I repeated. "It was easier to let Mom think her daughter was stealing from her." "I'm sorry," he said, looking at me directly for the first time since we'd cornered him. "I'm so sorry, Margaret. I never meant for it to go this far." But I could see in his eyes that he had meant for it to go this far. Every suggestion, every planted seed of doubt had been deliberate. The only thing he hadn't meant was to get caught. Mom closed the jewelry box with a soft click and looked up at Richard. "What other debts? What other things?" Richard's face went pale again. "Mom, I can explain." "How many times?" she asked, her voice gaining strength. "How many times have you taken something and let me think it was Margaret?" Sarah moved closer to Mom's chair, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed. "The silver picture frame from the mantel? The one with the photo of you and their father?" Richard nodded miserably. "I sold it last month." Mom's intake of breath was sharp and pained. That frame had held her wedding photo for 30 years. "You told me Margaret must have taken it because she'd always loved that picture." "And I believed you," Mom continued, her voice breaking. "I called her that night, so angry, so hurt. I accused my own daughter of stealing one of my most precious possessions." I remembered that phone call, the pain in Mom's voice, the way she'd cried as she asked me how I could have taken something that meant so much to her. I'd been so confused, so hurt by the accusation that I'd barely been able to defend myself. "Mom," I said softly, "you don't have to go through all of this now." But she shook her head, her jaw set with a determination I hadn't seen in months. "Yes, I do. I need to know everything. She turned back to Richard. What else? Richard seemed to shrink further into himself. Dad's coin collection, some of it anyway, and the antique clock from the hallway. Each confession hit Mom like a physical blow. These weren't just objects to her. They were memories, connections to Dad, pieces of the life they'd built together. The clock was your father's grandfather's, she whispered. It's been in our family for 4 generations. I can get it back, Richard said quickly. I know where the pawn shop is. I can... With what money? Sarah asked bluntly. The same money you said you didn't have? The debts that made you steal from your mother in the first place? Richard had no answer for that. We all knew the truth. Those items were gone, probably forever. Mom stood up slowly, still clutching the jewelry box. I need you to leave, she said to Richard. Mom, please, let me explain. Let me make this right. You've explained enough. Her voice was steady now, but I could see the effort it was costing her. And I don't know how you could possibly make this right. You didn't just steal from me, Richard. You stole my trust in Margaret. You made me doubt my own daughter. Richard looked desperately between Mom and me. Margaret, tell her you forgive me. Tell her we can work this out. I stared at my brother, this man who had systematically destroyed my relationship with our mother for his own selfish purposes. Part of me wanted to find forgiveness, to be the bigger person. But another part of me was still raw from months of Mom's suspicious looks and careful inventory of her possessions whenever I visited. I don't know if I can, I said honestly. The admission seemed to hit Richard harder than anything else. His face went white, and for the first time, I think he truly understood what he'd done. Please, he whispered. But before I could respond, Mom's phone rang from the counter, its shrill tone cutting through the heavy silence. She looked at the caller ID, and her face went even paler. It's the police, she said, her voice barely audible. Mom stared at the phone for another ring, her hand trembling slightly. The caller ID clearly showed the local police department number. Should I answer it? She asked, looking between Richard and me with obvious fear in her eyes. Richard had gone completely white. Mom, I can explain whatever this is about. You can explain? Sarah stood up abruptly. Richard, what else haven't you told us? The phone kept ringing, and Mom finally swiped to answer with shaking fingers. Hello? We could only hear her side of the conversation, but her face told us everything we needed to know. Her expression shifted from fear to confusion to a deep, bone-weary sadness. Yes, he's my son, she said quietly. No, I wasn't aware of any charges being filed. A long pause. Tomorrow morning? Yes, I understand. When she hung up, the silence in the kitchen felt suffocating. The Hendersons next door filed a police report, Mom said, her voice hollow. About their missing garden sculptures and outdoor furniture. They have security camera footage of someone who matches Richard's description. Richard slumped forward, putting his head in his hands. It was just a couple of times. I thought they wouldn't notice. They're barely ever home. You stole from the neighbors too? I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare. Richard, these people have been Mom's friends for 20 years. The police want to speak with him tomorrow, Mom continued, still staring at the phone. They said if he comes in voluntarily, it might go better for him. Sarah had been quietly observing everything, and now she moved to sit beside Mom. Mrs. Chen, you don't have to handle this alone. I don't know how to handle this at all, Mom admitted, and for the first time since Dad died, she looked truly lost. I feel like I don't know my own son. Richard finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Mom, I'm still me. I just made some really bad choices." "Bad choices?" The words came out sharper than I'd intended. "You destroyed our family over bad choices. You made Mom think I was stealing from her. Do you have any idea what that felt like? I know I hurt you. I know I hurt everyone." "No, you don't know," I said, standing up. "You don't know what it's like to have your own mother count the silverware after you visit. You don't know what it's like to see suspicion in her eyes every time you walk into a room. You don't know what it's like to lose your relationship with the only parent you have left because your brother decided his addiction was more important than family." "Margaret," Mom said softly, but I wasn't finished. "And the worst part is that you watched it happen. You sat there while Mom pulled away from me, while she stopped calling, while she started making excuses not to spend time together. You watched our relationship crumble, and you said nothing." Richard was crying now, but I felt no satisfaction in it. If anything, seeing my brother broken and desperate just made everything feel worse. "I wanted to tell the truth so many times," he said. "But then I'd think about disappointing you, Mom, about you knowing what I'd become. So instead, you let me be disappointed in Margaret," Mom said quietly. "You let me believe my daughter was capable of stealing from me." Sarah cleared her throat gently. "Richard, I think you need to understand something. This isn't just about the things you took. It's about the lies and the way those lies poisoned the relationships between people you're supposed to love." "I know that now." "Do you?" Sarah pressed. "Because knowing it and really understanding it are different things. Margaret lost months with her mother because of what you did. Your mom lost months with her daughter. That time doesn't come back, Richard. Those moments of doubt and hurt don't just disappear because you're sorry now." Mom was clutching the jewelry box again, running her fingers over its familiar surface. "When your father was dying, he made me promise to keep our family together. He was so worried about leaving us, about what would happen to the bonds between all of us." "Mom," Richard started, but she held up a hand. "I feel like I've failed him completely. Not just because of what you did, Richard, but because I failed Margaret too. I should have trusted her. I should have known better." "You couldn't have known," I said, moving to sit on Mom's other side. "Richard made sure of that. But I'm your mother. I raised you. I should have seen the difference between my daughter and my son's lies." We sat there for a moment, the weight of everything settling around us. The kitchen that had once been the heart of so many family gatherings now felt like the site of something broken, maybe irreparably. "What happens now?" Richard finally asked. "Now you go to the police tomorrow and you tell them the truth," Sarah said firmly. "All of it." "And the family?" he pressed, looking desperately at Mom and me. Mom was quiet for a long time, still holding Dad's jewelry box. "I don't know," she said finally. "I honestly don't know if we can come back from this." "Please," Richard whispered. "There has to be a way." Before anyone could answer, we heard the sound of a car door slamming in the driveway, followed by heavy footsteps on the front porch. We all froze. The footsteps were deliberate, familiar, and heading straight for the front door. A key turned in the lock. "Dad?" Richard called out, his voice cracking with confusion. But it wasn't Dad. It couldn't be. The heavy footsteps moved through the front hallway, and then Uncle Jim appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in his work clothes, looking tired and concerned. "Jim?" Mom breathed, setting down the jewelry box. "What are you doing here?" "Margaret called me earlier," he said, looking around at all of our tear-streaked faces. Said there was some kind of family emergency, something about the missing jewelry. I've been driving for 3 hours. I had completely forgotten about that call. It felt like days ago instead of this afternoon. You didn't need to drive all the way here, I said, suddenly feeling embarrassed about the scene he'd walked into. The hell I didn't. Jim pulled off his jacket and hung it on the back of a chair. When my niece calls me crying about stolen jewelry and family falling apart, I get in the car. That's what family does. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, wiping his eyes. Uncle Jim, Hold on there, son. Jim held up a hand, then looked around the kitchen more carefully. I can see something big has happened here. Margaret, you want to fill me in? I looked at Mom, then at Richard. The truth was out between us now, but explaining it to Jim felt like opening the wound all over again. Richard's been stealing from Mom, I said simply. He took the jewelry, the silver candlesticks, probably other things, and he let Mom think it was me. Jim's face went very still. He looked at Richard for a long moment, then at Mom. Is that right, Ruth? Mom nodded, looking exhausted. He confessed tonight. Everything Margaret said is true. I see. Jim pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. And how long has this been going on? Months, Richard said quietly. Since I lost my job. I've been selling things to pay rent, buy groceries. I didn't know how to tell anyone. So, instead, you let your sister take the blame. It wasn't a question. Jim's voice carried the same disappointment I'd been feeling, but somehow hearing it from him made Richard flinch even more. I was going to put everything back, Richard said weakly. With what money? Jim asked. If you're stealing to eat, where exactly was the money going to come from to buy back your mother's jewelry? Richard had no answer for that. Jim, please, Mom said. We're trying to figure out how to move forward. Are we? Jim looked around the table. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Richard here has been lying and stealing for months, let his sister's relationship with her mother fall apart, and now wants to know if we can all just pretend it didn't happen. That's not what I want, Richard protested. Then what do you want? I want to make it right. I want my family back. Jim leaned back in his chair. You know what your brother did while you were going through this, Margaret? He called me 3 times, asking if I thought you might be having money problems, if maybe you seemed different lately, acting all concerned about your well-being. My stomach dropped. What? Oh yes, real worried brother act. Said he was thinking of staging some kind of intervention, get you help for what he called your problems. I told him he was crazy, that you'd never steal from Ruth. Guess I know now why he was so interested in my opinion. Richard's face had gone white. I wasn't going to... Weren't going to what? Frame your sister even more than you already had? Jim's voice was getting louder. Make sure the whole family thought she was a thief? Jim, that's enough, Mom said firmly. Is it? Because I drove 3 hours tonight thinking my family was in crisis, and it turns out we are, but not the way I thought. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of the old refrigerator humming. Jim ran his hands through his hair, suddenly looking as tired as the rest of us. I'm sorry, he said after a moment. I shouldn't have come in here yelling. But damn it, Richard, what were you thinking? I don't know, Richard said. I don't know what I was thinking about any of it. The weight of Jim's words settled over us like a heavy blanket. I watched Richard's shoulders shake slightly, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt a flicker of something that might have been pity. He looked small sitting there at Mom's kitchen table, surrounded by the evidence of what he'd done. "The intervention idea," I said quietly. "You were really going to do that?" Richard couldn't meet my eyes. I panicked. Every time Mom mentioned something missing, I saw how she looked at you. And instead of just confessing, I thought if everyone believed you had a problem, maybe when the truth came out later, people would just think you were getting better. "That's not how theft works, Richard," Jim said, his voice calmer but still edged with anger. "You don't just get better from something you never did." Mom reached across the table and touched Richard's hand. Even now, even after everything, she was trying to comfort him. It made my chest ache. "Why didn't you just ask for help? Any of us would have helped you." "I was ashamed," Richard whispered. 35 years old, and I couldn't even keep a job. Couldn't pay my rent. I didn't want anyone to know how badly I'd screwed up my life. The kitchen felt smaller somehow, filled with all the words we'd been avoiding for months. I found myself studying the familiar details. The coffee stain on the tablecloth that had been there since Christmas. The way the overhead light caught the silver threads in Mom's hair. The stack of mail she always kept in the same spot by the window. "So, you decided to screw up mine instead," I said. It came out harsher than I'd intended, but I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. Maybe I wouldn't be ready for a long time. "I know you probably hate me," Richard said. "I don't hate you." The words surprised me as I said them. "I'm furious with you. I'm hurt and disappointed, and I don't understand how you could watch me cry in this kitchen and not say anything. But I don't hate you." Jim leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "The job situation? How bad is it really?" "Bad," Richard admitted. "I've been unemployed for 4 months. My savings ran out 6 weeks ago. I'm 2 months behind on rent." "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Anything at this point. I've applied everywhere. Retail, restaurants, temp agencies." "Nobody's calling back." Mom was quiet for a moment, then stood up and moved to the counter where she kept her address book. The same worn, spiral notebook she'd had for years, held together with rubber bands and covered in her careful handwriting. "Margaret, didn't you say your office was hiring for that reception position?" I blinked. "Mom, I don't think... It's not charity," she continued, flipping through the pages. "It's a real job with real requirements, but Richard has office experience and he needs work." "I can't ask Margaret to help me get a job," Richard said. "Not after what I've done." "You're not asking," Jim pointed out. "She's offering. There's a difference." I looked at my brother, really looked at him. His shirt was wrinkled, probably worn more than once between washings. His hair needed cutting. There were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry. When had he gotten so thin? "It's just answering phones and basic filing," I heard myself saying. "The pay isn't great, but it's steady. Full-time, with benefits after 90 days. Richard's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve your help." "No," I agreed. "You probably don't, but that's not really the point, is it?" The silence that followed felt different somehow, less heavy. Mom sat back down, reaching for both of our hands across the table. "We're going to figure this out," she said firmly. "All of it. Richard, you're going to get your life back on track. And you're going to find a way to make amends for what you've put your sister through. Real amends, not just apologies." "How?" Richard asked. "We'll start with honesty," Jim said. "Complete honesty from now on. About the job search, about money, about everything. No more secrets." I nodded slowly. And therapy. You need to talk to someone about why you thought letting me take the blame was easier than asking for help. I can't afford therapy. Mom's insurance, Jim said immediately. You're still eligible as her dependent in a crisis situation. We'll figure it out. The practical planning felt good, like we were building something instead of just tearing down what Richard had destroyed. But there was still something lodged in my chest, a hard knot of hurt that wouldn't dissolve just because we were making lists and solving problems. I need you to understand something, I said to Richard. This isn't just about the stealing. It's about trust. It's about the fact that you sat in this same kitchen 3 weeks ago and listened to me cry about feeling like I was losing my family, and you said nothing. I wanted to tell you, but you didn't, and that's going to take time to get over. I can help you find work, and we can all move forward. But I need you to know that things aren't just going to go back to normal because we had one honest conversation. Richard nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I understand. Do you? I pressed. Because I don't think you really get what you did to us. To Mom and me. She's been worried sick that I was in some kind of trouble. I've been worried sick that she didn't trust me anymore. We've both been losing sleep and losing faith in each other. And all of that was because of choices you made. The words kept coming, months of frustration and hurt pouring out of me. I started doubting myself, wondering if I really had moved something and forgotten about it. Questioning my own memory, my own honesty. Do you understand what that feels like? No, Richard whispered. I don't think I do. It feels like losing your mind, Mom said quietly. It feels like losing your daughter. We sat with that for a moment, the full weight of what Richard's deception had cost us. Outside, I could hear the wind picking up, rattling the kitchen window that never quite closed properly. Normal sounds of a normal evening, except nothing about this felt normal. I'm going to make this right, Richard said finally. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'm going to make this right. Jim reached across the table and gripped Richard's shoulder. We know you will. We're going to help you. But Margaret's right. This is going to take time. I looked around the table at my family, damaged but not broken, hurt but not beyond healing. We had a long way to go, all of us. But for the first time in months, I felt like we were finally moving in the same direction. Okay, I said. Let's figure out how to start.